Thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us about your background before your near-death experience? Of course. I was a scientist and science writer. I did a lot of technical writing and didn't believe in anything beyond our physical existence. That's quite interesting. So, what led to your near-death experience? I was living near Boulder, Colorado. One day, I was riding my bicycle in a bike lane, just doing errands around town. Suddenly, a woman driving a large SUV hit me. She was texting and not paying attention. She blew through an intersection and hit me broadside. That sounds terrifying. What happened next? I got stuck on the underside of her vehicle. I know that sounds horrible, but it was actually better than the alternative. During this time, I had the experience of being in two places at once. Two places at once? Can you elaborate on that? Yes, it was strange. One part of me was still in my body, under the vehicle. But another part, which I'd call my soul or higher self, was standing off at a distance, observing the whole thing. What was that like? The part of me still in my body was terrified, just focused on survival and doing everything I could to stay alive. But the part of me outside the accident was very calm and serene. It was almost saying, "This is all going to be fine. Don't worry, it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay." That's fascinating. How long did this dual awareness last? It lasted until the paramedics arrived, which was pretty quick. At that point, both aspects of my consciousness merged back into my body. What was the extent of your injuries? It was pretty severe. My spine was basically broken. I had 9 vertebrae that were cracked to pieces. One of them was almost completely blown apart. They stopped counting fractures at 100. Most of the damage was to my neck and spine. Luckily, I had a helmet on. I probably would have died without it. That's incredible that you survived such extensive injuries. What happened next? In the ER, everything was relatively calm. I didn't have any unusual experiences there. But a few days later, I had to go into surgery to repair all the damage in my spine so that I could walk again. And that's when things got interesting? Exactly. The accident happened on a Friday, so I was in ICU over the weekend. Then I went into surgery on Monday afternoon. As soon as they administered the anesthetic, I coded. "You mean your heart stopped?" "Yes." I had no blood pressure, no pulse, and my breathing stopped. And then suddenly, I found myself standing on a hillside. Just like that? You were suddenly somewhere else entirely? Yes, and I was very confused. I thought, wait a minute, this is not where I'm supposed to be right now. I knew something was up, but I didn't know what it was right away. I remembered that I was in surgery and that I was badly injured. So I was wondering, what am I doing standing up on a hillside, looking out over mountains and forests? It sounds beautiful, at least. Oh, it was amazingly beautiful. But I was definitely confused at first. How long did this experience seem to last? It's hard to say. Time in these NDEs doesn't equate to time here. It's difficult to know how long I was really in that state, but it seemed like a long time. What happened next? After a while, I started to notice something strange. I began to feel almost like an energy coming into me. But it wasn't like heat or sound or anything physical like that. What kind of energy was it? Somehow, I knew that it was the energy of divine love. I don't know how I knew that, but I did. It felt peaceful, calming, loving, and accepting. How did that make you feel? That's when I kind of did an internal double take. I thought, wait a minute. You see, my background as a kid had taught me that I wouldn't have any chance at all of going to a happy afterlife. That wasn't in the cards for a non-believer like me. But that's not what you were experiencing? Not at all. What I was starting to feel was acceptance for who I was, love, and kind of a welcoming presence. It was almost like being cradled or hugged, but very gently, with full knowledge of who I was. Even though we all make mistakes in our lives, I still felt welcomed and accepted. That must have been quite a paradigm shift for you. Absolutely. I began to wonder if I had died on the operating table. I was still that analytical about the whole thing, once a scientist, always a scientist, I guess. And then I had another thought, wait a minute, if I did die, why am I here with this loving presence? Why am I experiencing all this love and acceptance? Did you get an answer to that question? I did, and it was powerful. I didn't voice the question out loud, it was really just an internal wondering. But an answer came from outside, from everywhere. I can't say if it was a male or female voice, but it was very powerful. What did the voice say? The voice said, "This is your home. You are a part of me." The implication was that I was like a child of this presence. It continued, "You're part of this realm. This is your home. Welcome home." How did that make you feel? I still get choked up about it because it was so loving. When that voice came and said that, I realized, oh my God, now I remember. That earth thing was just a temporary existence, and this really is home. I remembered that this place, this state of being, was home for our souls. I just wept. I felt like I was crying, it was just so powerful and moving. Did anything else happen during this experience? Yes, there was more. What felt like a female presence came into the area where I was standing. It was hard for me to get a clear view of her face, it was a bit fuzzy. But she gave me this big, amazing hug and told me that she was going to teach me what I needed to know in order to go back to my life on Earth and make it one worth living. She wanted you to go back? Yes, and at first, I really didn't want to go. It's kind of funny because I sort of pitched a fit. I was like a 2-year-old having a temper tantrum, not quite that bad, not rolling on the ground, but I was definitely not happy about the idea of being sent back. What did she say to that? She said, "Well, you've already agreed to go back. That was part of your plan when you chose this life that you're in right now as Nancy." I told her I didn't remember that part, so she showed me. Showed you? How? It was almost like a video, but more than that. The closest I can come to describing it is like a big video in the air in front of me. I saw myself with what you might call angels, and maybe God as well, or that divine presence, agreeing to some of the things that I wanted to do and experience, but also how I wanted to serve. What had you agreed to? I had agreed to be basically an atheist. I wanted to experience turning away from that divine presence for a while, but then I wanted to re-enter it. I had made this deal that there would be 3 or 4 points in my earlier life where I would have the opportunity to make that shift back to being a spiritual person. But I missed them all. So what was this experience, then? This was sort of the endpoint. If I didn't change back to being a spiritual person at points A, B, or C, then I would have to have kind of a big wake-up call. And that's what this was, that wake-up call, because I had missed those other opportunities. How did you react when you saw this? When I saw that, I realized, okay, I do remember that now. I sort of did already remember it, which just made it more obnoxious because I really didn't want to go back. Why didn't you want to go back? It's hard here, you know? It's really hard here. And it's so much different over on the other side. In some ways, it is better. We don't get to experience the same things as here, but there's a lot less that gets in your way, and it's easier to do certain things. So what happened next? Well, I decided to go along with it for now and see what would happen. I agreed to learn from this woman. If I was to put that time in here on Earth learning the things that I did with her, it would probably take a good couple of months. Can you share some of the highlights of what you learned? Sure. One part one don't talk about a lot in interviews, so I'd like to highlight it here. It was like I was in this holographic kind of experience where I was trying to wrap my head around what my path in life was supposed to be. What did that look like? She had me standing on a big prairie or something similar, a big open area. All of a sudden, around me, kind of in the air, appeared this big map. It wasn't a map of Earth, though. It was a map of my life, showing in real time all the different paths that I could have taken, and little areas where if I had done this, here's where it would have gone. What was the lesson in that? Part of that whole teaching was that there isn't necessarily one right path through your life. You can make adjustments. There are many, many ways to work through a life. It was powerful to see that huge visual representation that there is no one right path. No matter what you do, it's a choice, and you can adjust and make changes and really have amazing experiences and learn a lot of things, no matter what path you take. That's a powerful lesson. Were there any other significant experiences? Yes, the biggest one that I really like to talk about was my life review. Can you describe that? I was taken to this big, beautiful pond. It looked like it was kind of up in the mountains somewhere. My whole NDE was like I was out hiking in the mountains, that's where I like to be. They took me out in the mountains, and she asked me to just sit down at the edge of the pond and touch the surface of the water and see what happens. How did you feel about that? By this time, I was really weary of lessons. I just wanted to be done with it because it seemed like it had been going on forever. This was actually one of the last lessons that I had. She put her hands on her hips and said, "Would you just do it, please?" So you did it? Yes, I did. I reached out and just tapped the surface of the water and then sat back and watched. There were many lessons in this, so I'll talk a little bit about these. What did you see? On top of all those little ripples, all across the surface of the pond, when I looked out there, it was my life. All these little different videos were moments of my life. When I looked at one of those little video moments, I got sucked back into it. It was very weird and very cool at the same time. You got to re-experience moments of your life? Exactly. I got to re-experience that moment, whatever it was. One of them was when I was a teenager, and I had said something to intentionally hurt my younger sister. You know, siblings can be nasty to each other, and I was really nasty to her at that time. I said something very hurtful, very intentionally. What was different about experiencing it this time? Well, she didn't appear to react outwardly at the time. But during this little life review, not only could I see and experience myself saying that again, I also got to feel what she was feeling. It was horrifying to me. It still chokes me up, like, oh my God, I can't believe how horrible she felt, and I was the cause of it. That must have been intense. It was. That experience was the catalyst for me to change my entire life. We don't live on this planet by ourselves. Everything that we do and say has an effect on other people, whether we want to admit it or not. When you feel how you make someone else feel, it can really give you a completely different view on the nature of compassion. Were all the experiences negative like that? No, not at all. To balance that out, because I was feeling really horrible when I saw that, she showed me a time when I did something that was helpful for someone. What was that experience? It was a clerk at a grocery store at Christmas. I tell this story a lot because it really moved me. I was able to feel how good she felt when I told her she was doing an amazing job on a really busy day, having to put up with abusive customers. I felt how grateful she was and how much that lifted her spirits. When she went home that night, she was able to bring a better outlook on life to her kids and her family. So even small acts of kindness can have a big impact? Absolutely. Even little things like that really have an impact on other people. The whole thing really, for me, was about love. Everything that I learned always came back to love, compassion, and kindness. What's the main message you took from all this? It's really all about coming back here and being love as much as possible, including to ourselves. Because a lot of us find it easier to love another person or to show kindness or compassion to someone else, but we tend to beat ourselves up. We're supposed to be bringing that love into our own lives as well. Any other important lessons? Be grateful. That's a form of love, a form of appreciation. It really strengthens those spiritually energetic bonds that we all have. Even if we don't say anything with our mouths or speak it or show it in our actions, just our energy alone, if we're bringing love into a situation, that energy of our own internal love can really change the situation, even if we don't say anything. That's powerful. Anything else? Energy is powerful because we here are all energy. We're all based on energy, even though it doesn't seem like it. We really are. Did you have any more experiences before returning? Yes, I did have one last thing that my teacher helped me with before she sent me back. She gave me an energy healing because she knew that my body, when I woke up, would be in a lot of pain and it would take a long time to heal. Were you afraid to go back? I was really afraid to go back into my body because I knew how badly broken it was. It wasn't clear whether I was going to ever be able to walk again. I was terrified about that, and I was also afraid of the pain. You know, I'm kind of a wimp, so I didn't want to feel all that pain. So what did she do? She gave me what I would call an energy healing over parts of my body that would be the most painful, and then sent me back. What happened when you woke up? I woke up in the recovery room. It was actually kind of humorous in hindsight, though it wasn't at the time. I literally woke up kicking and screaming, like top of my lungs screaming, "Go back." How did the medical staff react? The nurse who was with me as they were waking me up did a double take. She ran and got the doctor because they thought something was really happening medically. I'm just babbling and yelling, "Just send me back." They're looking at me like, "What is this? How long did it take you to calm down?" It took me a while to really calm down. I kept asking for my friend, my teacher, and they had no idea what I was talking about. They thought it was the woman that was waiting in the waiting room for me, my friend. They brought her in, and I'm like, "No, that's not who I'm talking about. The one that was with me when I was dead." And they're like, "What are you talking about?" That must have been confusing for everyone. It was. It took me a bit of time to really calm down from that. For the next 12 hours, I really didn't sleep. I'm just thinking about what happened, and I was afraid to tell anybody because I imagined that they wouldn't believe me. I kept replaying the events in my mind, questioning if it was all real or if I was just imagining things. The fear and the uncertainty were overwhelming. So you were afraid to tell anyone about your experience? Yes, I imagined that they were going to lock me up in a psych ward. That's really what I was afraid of. I thought maybe I needed it because I didn't know what this was. Did you eventually tell someone? The next morning, one of the chaplains came in. They'd realized that when I was brought into the hospital, this was a Lutheran facility at the time, I had refused chaplain service because I told them, "Look, I'm an atheist. It's cool for you to be here, but I really don't want to see a chaplain." And they honored that the whole time before the surgery. So what happened when the chaplain came in? She walked in that next morning, and I literally said, "Oh, thank God you're here." Because I didn't know what to do with what had happened. So she spent close to an hour with me, talking about how I had died, and she wanted to hear as much as I could tell her. Were you able to tell her everything? I told her as much as I could. You have to keep in mind, too, at the time I was refusing pain meds. I was only on Tylenol, which in hindsight was crazy, but that's all I needed. Why were you refusing stronger pain medication? The reason I was refusing anything else was I didn't want it messing with my head. So I was really lucid. I want people to understand I wasn't hallucinating or anything. I know what a hallucination is like. This was not one of them. How did the chaplain respond to your story? She said, what you had was what's called a near-death experience, and I want you to understand that it was real. That must have been a relief to hear. It was. I was super lucky. I was one of those few near-death experiencers at that time who was lucky enough to have someone right there explaining to me what had happened, that it was real and that I wasn't crazy. That was a huge gift. How did this experience change you? If I hadn't had that assistance right away, I don't know that I would have talked about this with anybody else. It was a big shift for me as a scientist to suddenly have my entire world flipped upside down. I wanted it to go back to the way it was, but I knew I couldn't unsee this. I couldn't unexperience it. That's quite a transformation. Now, I heard in another interview that you talked about a spiritual experience you had right before your father died. Can you share that story? Yes, this was about a year before he passed. He was a big hunter, he loved hunting and fishing. He told me he was bound and determined to go hunting, even though he was so ill and so frail he could barely walk. I'm thinking, this is not a recipe for a good day. So I volunteered to take him out and just make sure he was okay while he was out hunting. That was kind of you. What happened next? I drove over to his home the day before. Through all that time, I was a meditator. I wasn't doing it for spiritual reasons. I was doing it to learn how to calm down because I was so anxious all the time. When I got over there in the evening, I was really feeling agitated, so I went into the guest bedroom and just meditated for quite a while. And something unusual happened during this meditation? Yes, all of a sudden, I wasn't me anymore. It was like I was viewing someone else's life. It was a man named Sidney, Sidney. I was sort of looking out of Sidney's eyes. He was 18 or 19 at the time, and he was standing with a small group of other young men the same age. One of them was my dad. That must have been strange. What did you see? Sidney and my dad were really good friends, and Sidney kept calling my dad Willie. I'd never heard anybody call him Willie ever. My dad's name was Bill. We called him either Bill or William. I called him Dad, but everybody else usually called him Bill or William. I didn't know who Sidney was. So you were watching this interaction from Sidney's perspective? Yes, I'm sort of watching from Sidney's eyes this interaction that he had with my dad as a teenage boy. He kept calling him Willie. The other boys didn't know it at the time, but Sidney had just volunteered to go into the army. What happened next in this vision? Well, Sidney didn't get drafted, he volunteered. He went off and fought in Vietnam. Here I am watching all of this, but then there was a point at which, a couple of years after he left, I'm watching Sidney in a firefight. It was bad. I don't know that it was napalm, but it was like something like that where the trees were on fire and there were gunshots all over the place. That sounds terrifying. It was. Sidney was with his squadron, and they were trying to go somewhere. He was trying to help his squadron get to where they were going, but he died at that point. So what happened after you saw Sidney die? I knew Sidney was giving me this experience, and he told me directly. It was like all of a sudden I disconnected from it, and he said, "Tell Willie I'm sorry that I didn't come back." He knew I was Willie's daughter, and I was just watching all this. Did you tell your father about this experience? Not that night. I didn't tell my dad that night. I went out and sat and watched TV with my parents and went to bed because I knew it would freak my mom out. So I didn't say anything in front of them. When did you tell him? The next morning, when my dad was getting ready to go hunting and we were putting the gear in the truck, I took him aside and I said, "Dad, who's Sidney?" How did he react? He literally stood back and his eyes got really big. He said, "How do you know Sidney?" I said, "Well, he came to me last night, and he told me he was sorry he didn't come back from Korea." That must have been quite emotional for your father. I'd never seen my dad cry. He was crying, and it took him a while to compose himself. He said, "That's right. Sidney was my best friend when I was young. He was a little bit older, and he went off to Korea and died. He never came home." What did you tell him then? I said, "He wanted you to know he was sorry he couldn't come back." That's incredibly powerful. How did this experience affect you? As you can tell, it's still really powerful. We can have that connection. Sidney really wanted my dad to know that he loved him as a friend, and he wanted him to know how sorry he was. And he was able to do that through me. Did you understand what was happening at the time? I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just in that place and receptive and passed along the message. Do you know how it affected your dad? I don't know how it affected my dad. He was a very quiet guy. He did thank me for that, and we never talked about it again. He didn't want to go there. But I think it really affected him. I think it helped him because I think he knew at that point that he wasn't going to make it out of this cancer thing alive. You mentioned earlier that you also heard music shortly after he passed. Can you tell us about that? Yes, about a year later, my dad passed. The moment that he passed, I was asleep. He died at like 4 in the morning. I was asleep, and I woke up, and I could see him at the foot of my bed. I knew he had just gone, and he was there for just a few moments. He didn't say anything. I think he just wanted to say goodbye, and then he just sort of disappeared behind a curtain. It was really kind of bizarre. What happened next? That's when my brother called and said, "You know, Dad just died." So I drove over there with my partner at the time. We walked up to the front door of the house. I reached out to grab the handle and open the door, and I heard music. What kind of music? It was not human music. This was angel singing, divine music, like beautiful choral music that we can't produce here on this planet. I couldn't hear anything else. It was so powerful. Did anyone else hear it? I turned to my partner and said, "Do you hear that?" He said, "What?" because he didn't hear it. I did. And along with that music, I felt and almost heard utter joy, my dad's joy, and a welcoming. What did you think was happening? I thought maybe, just maybe, my brother and my mom had put on some orchestral music or something to kind of calm things down. But they didn't. They didn't have anything on. So what did you do? I'm walking around listening to this music, and I knew my dad was okay. I knew that just for that moment, I had a little brief glimpse of the spiritual realm again. How did you reconcile this with your scientific worldview? Then I shut it down hard because it didn't fit into my scientific worldview. But for that moment, I knew this reality was much bigger than we think it is. You mentioned hearing similar music during your NDE. Can you compare the experiences? When I had my NDE, I heard that music. It was incredible. You can't describe it, it's just indescribably beautiful. I almost can't listen to human music anymore. It was so powerful. Do you think experiences like these are common? There are a lot of people who have these near-death experiences. By about a year after my own NDE, I finally got up the courage to tell my physician what had happened. He admitted he has near-death experiences all the time at the hospital with his patients. Really? How often? He said at least once a month where he personally does. He attends a lot of people in the last days of their lives in the hospital, and he says, "Yep, this happens all the time." Why don't we hear about this more often? Doctors don't like to talk about it. Most doctors still don't want to talk about it because they don't really know what to do with it. My doctor said, "I think it's the coolest thing in the world because it means that we survive. Our consciousness survives." That's fascinating. Is there anything else you'd like to share about your experiences or what you've learned? I think the most important thing I've learned is the power of love and compassion. These experiences have shown me that everything is interconnected, and the way we treat others, and ourselves, has far-reaching effects that we may not always see. It's changed the way I live my life and interact with the world around me. That's a beautiful message. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Nancy. Your story is truly inspiring and thought-provoking. Thank you for having me and allowing me to share my experiences. I hope they can bring some comfort and insight to others who may be grappling with similar questions about life, death, and what lies beyond.